Welcome back to PodWavePulse. Ready to have your mind blown?
Always.
Excellent. Today, we're going to dive deep into something truly wild. We're talking about how science fiction, those stories about spaceships and robots and crazy gadgets, how those stories actually predicted the technology we're using, right now, every single day. You sent over some seriously fascinating material on this, and we're so excited to, unpack it all.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to uncover all these surprising links between science fiction and real technology, and maybe give you a fresh perspective on those stories. So we've got about 15 specific examples.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, everything from really old films to, more recent books that somehow saw the future coming. Buckle up, because you're in for some serious wait, what moments.
I'm ready. I have my seatbelt on.
Okay, perfect. So first up, let's talk about something most of us use all the time now, pretty much daily. Video calls. Okay, so it might sound crazy, but this concept actually showed up way back in 1927.
Wow.
I know. Fritz Lang's movie Metropolis. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, a classic.
Yeah. Metropolis showed something that looks a lot like video calls. And then, of course, there's the Jetsons.
Oh, yeah.
They made video calls seem totally normal.
Right.
Just part of everyday life.
Fast forward to today, and now we've got Skype, Zoom, FaceTime.
Right.
All of those became really common in the early 2000s. It's wild, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the human need to connect across distances, even back then.
Totally. Metropolis was a silent film, but it still tapped into that desire to see and hear someone far away. The technology wasn't quite there yet, but they had the idea.
Yeah, they did.
And speaking of staying connected, what about Captain Kirk?
Oh, yeah.
With his communicator on Star Trek?
The flip phone.
Back in the 60s? Totally foreshadowed our mobile phones.
Right.
I mean, it's the same idea.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. A little pocket-sized device for talking to people.
And the first actual cell phone came out in 1973, thanks to Martin Cooper. And then smartphones like iPhones and Androids. Those just exploded around 2007.
That's true.
Almost like Star Trek gave us a little sneak peek into the future.
Yeah. And maybe it even inspired some of the people who developed those technologies.
Yeah.
Maybe seeing that communicator on TV as a kid made them think, hey, I want to build something like that.
That's a really cool thought.
It makes you wonder.
Right. So next up, let's talk about those awesome tablet computers we use all the time now, for everything.
The sleek ones, yeah.
So get this. The movie, 2001, A Space Odyssey from 1968.
Oh, yeah.
Classic.
Amazing movie.
An amazing movie. They actually showed astronauts using what looked like touchscreen tablets.
Really?
Yeah. And then boom, in 2010, Apple releases the iPad.
Wow. The resemblance is uncanny.
Totally uncanny. Almost like they got the idea from the movie.
It's true. And it wasn't just a vague idea of a portable computer. They showed a thin rectangular device.
Yeah.
With a screen, that they were interacting with directly.
Yeah.
It's a really accurate visual prediction.
It's a really good point. And speaking of 2001, we can't forget HAL 9000.
Oh, right.
That voice-activated computer, sometimes a little bit homicidal, but it definitely hinted at the voice assistants we have now.
Right, like Siri and Alexa.
Exactly. Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Apple Siri, all of those became super common after 2011. It's funny, I still get a little nervous when Alexa doesn't understand me.
I know what you mean.
It's like a little flashback to HAL 9000.
What's she going to do next?
Exactly. But the main idea is the same, right? We're talking to our technology, giving it commands.
Exactly. And that was a huge concept in science fiction, interacting with technology through voice commands. But of course, science fiction often explores the potential downsides of that kind of technology,
right,
too.
Yeah, definitely. What could go wrong?
Right. Which is something we're still dealing with today.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go a little bit more low-tech for a minute. But something we see everywhere, automatic doors.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever just walked through an automatic door without even thinking about it?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
I know, they're just part of life. But H.G. Wells actually imagined automatic doors way back in his novels, and they were in a lot of early science fiction films.
Yeah.
And Star Trek, of course.
Of course.
I mean, it's almost like science fiction helps us get used to these futuristic ideas.
Yeah, they become normal.
Totally. Okay, let's go back to the really futuristic stuff. Virtual reality. VR.
Right.
That feeling of being totally immersed in another world when you put on a VR headset.
Yeah.
So Stanley G. Weinbaum, he wrote a story in 1935 called Pygmalion's Spectacles. And he describes something that sounds a lot like VR.
Really?
Yeah. And then in the 2010s, boom, We get mainstream VR with Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, and PlayStation VR.
Wow.
It's like life imitating art.
Right. And what's really interesting is that Weinbaum didn't just focus on the visual aspect.
Right.
He imagined a device that could stimulate all of the senses
Yeah.
to create a truly immersive experience,
Yeah.
which is still the goal of VR technology today.
Totally. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something that still feels a little bit futuristic to some people. Self-driving cars.
Okay, yeah.
So Isaac Asimov actually predicted this in his 1953 short story, Sally.
Okay.
And then the movie Total Recall from 1990 showed us those self-driving taxis.
Right.
And now we've got companies like Tesla with autopilot,
Yeah.
Google Waymo,
Yeah.
a bunch of other companies working on this technology. It feels like it's right around the corner.
Yeah, it does.
Like self-driving cars are going to be everywhere soon.
I think so.
And you know what's interesting is that science fiction doesn't just focus on the technology itself.
Right.
It also explores how that technology might change society. Like Asimov's stories, they often talked about the ethical side of things, like with robots and AI.
Like, what are the rules? What are the moral implications?
Exactly. And those are the same questions we're asking about self-driving cars today.
Absolutely.
So this next one might seem really obvious because it's so connected to science fiction. Space travel.
Yeah.
Especially the moon landing. But I think it's still worth talking about. Jules Verne. Back in 1865, he wrote a novel called From the Earth to the Moon.
Okay.
And this book totally captured everyone's imagination way before the actual moon landing in 1969 with Apollo 11.
Right. It's like he planted the seed.
Exactly. Like he made people believe that it could actually happen.
That's a good point.
What's really amazing is how much detail Verne put into his book, considering what they knew about space travel back then.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it was pretty limited.
He even imagined this giant cannon that would launch the spacecraft.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's not how it actually happened.
Of course not.
But it shows that he was really trying to think about the science.
Yeah, he was trying to figure out how to make it work.
Exactly. So let's move on to something a lot smaller, but still super common today. Those tiny earpieces people wear all the time now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Ray Bradbury, in his book Fahrenheit 451 from 1953, he described these things called Seashells.
Okay.
They were wireless earphones.
What?
And then around 2016, Apple AirPods and all those similar devices became super popular.
Yeah, they did.
Almost like Bradbury could see the future.
It's true. And it's interesting that those seashells weren't just for listening to music.
Right.
In the book, they were a way to constantly be plugged into information and entertainment.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how we live now. Like, we're always connected.
Totally. We've got our phones and our headphones and everything.
Right.
So let's talk about another big one. Artificial intelligence, AI,
Okay.
and robots. The word robot actually comes from a play written in 1921. Yeah. It's called R.U.R. It stands for Rossum's Universal Robots.
Okay.
And science fiction has been exploring AI and robots for over a century now. And we're finally seeing huge advancements in those fields. AI is impacting so many industries and even our daily lives.
It really is. It's changing everything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how AI has been portrayed in science fiction over time. Starting with simple mechanical beings and then moving to these complex, self-aware entities.
Yeah.
It reflects how our own understanding of intelligence and consciousness has evolved. And science fiction keeps pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible.
It definitely does. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about money. Specifically, the idea of a cashless society.
Yeah.
Edward Bellamy, he wrote a novel back in 1888 called Looking Backward.
Oh.
And in that book, he predicted something that's basically like credit cards.
Oh, wow.
And then modern credit cards became widespread after the 1950s.
Right.
And now we have things like Bitcoin, digital currency.
Cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Right. All of that started around 2009. It's been a long evolution, but the idea was there in science fiction all along.
It's true. And it shows how those societal changes envisioned in fiction, they can take time to actually happen.
Yeah.
Because technology has to catch up and economic systems have to adapt. But the underlying desire for convenience,
Right.
For easy transactions, that was always there.
Absolutely. Okay. Who remembers the replicators on Star Trek?
Oh, yeah.
The things that could instantly create food and objects.
Like make anything you want.
Exactly. Well, that's not too far off from 3D printing.
Yep.
Which became commercially available in the early 2010s.
Right.
We might not be able to replicate a cup of tea with the push of a button.
Not yet.
Not yet. But being able to create physical objects from digital designs is still pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And the potential of 3D printing is huge, for manufacturing and for personalized products. And the idea of the replicator definitely helped fuel that imagination.
Absolutely. So think about this. How do we get global communication? Satellites.
Yeah.
Arthur C. Clarke. Back in 1945, he accurately described geostationary communication satellites.
Oh, wow.
And the first one, Telstar, was launched in 1962.
That's incredible.
Talk about predicting the future.
Yeah, he really nailed that one. And he didn't just guess, he understood orbital mechanics.
Right.
So he was able to propose a technically sound concept for global communication.
It's amazing what the human mind can do. Okay, one more iconic science fiction technology, holograms.
Wow.
Remember those amazing floating projections in Star Wars?
Oh, yeah?
From 1977?
Classic.
Well, now we have realistic holographic displays.
We do.
They're being used for performances and meetings and all sorts of events.
Yeah.
It started becoming more common in the early 2000s.
That's true.
We might not be getting holographic messages from Princess Leia just yet.
Not yet.
But the technology is getting there.
It is.
And the visual impact of holograms in science fiction, that has definitely driven a lot of the research and development in this field.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great example of how a cool visual in a movie can inspire real-world innovation.
Totally. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about wearable tech. Remember Dick Tracy's wrist-communicator?
Oh, yeah, from the comics.
Yeah, from the 1930s all the way to the 1960s.
Right.
That was totally the precursor to our smartwatches today.
It was.
Like the Apple Watch, which came out in 2015, and the Fitbit, which was around 2009.
Yeah.
It's like we've been wearing a little piece of science fiction on our wrists for decades.
And that desire for personal portable communication and information, yeah, that's been a theme in both fiction and reality for a long time.
Absolutely. And the smartwatch is kind of like the ultimate expression of that desire.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's pretty mind-blowing, right, to see how many of these crazy ideas from science fiction are now just part of our everyday lives.
It is.
It shows you the power of imagination and how these stories can sometimes be like a blueprint for the future.
Yeah, like a roadmap.
Totally. What stood out to you the most from all of these examples?
I don't know. I think maybe the VR one. Just because it's such a complete sensory experience.
Yeah.
And we're still working on getting that perfect.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Makes you wonder what they'll come up with next.
Exactly. And what science fiction technologies are you still waiting for?
I think teleportation would be pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. That would change everything.
It would.
Well, we've just scratched the surface of this topic. But hopefully it's made you think a little bit differently about science fiction.
Yeah, for sure.
And the connection between those stories and the real world. If you want to dive deeper into this topic, please subscribe to our channel for more insightful news. And as always, thanks for listening to PodWavePulse.
See you next time.